the sixth episode of the In a Nutshell podcast, where Joe Meade and I go over the Big Ten. Today, we're going to be previewing week 3 of the college football slate. We've got a couple conference games and a lot of non-conference games as we turn the page to week 3. Joe, let's start off with Friday night. Virginia head to Maryland. Maryland's big favorites, 7 o'clock FS1. Maryland should be able to take care of business here, right?
Absolutely. I think this is a theme we're going to see throughout tonight. I think Maryland's just got to piece things together. They did not play well in the first half last week against Charlotte. They fell down 14 to nothing very early in the game. And it wasn't until the second half till they got a rhythm going. Talia Tagovailoa, I mean, there's no other way to say it. He's got to limit those turnovers. He's got to stop throwing the ball away. Having 2 interceptions against Charlotte's not going to cut it. And I don't think Virginia would make him pay for turnovers either, unless it was egregious. But, we're coming up to that point of the season, Sean, where if you're not tested yet, your test is coming very soon. I could say that for probably about 12 of the 14 teams in the conference right now. So, they do play at Michigan State next week. We'll get into Michigan State a little later when we preview their matchup against Washington. But, Maryland's going to have to be on their A game to win that one in East Lansing. So, thinking about this is obviously you want to beat Virginia, you want to beat your former conference foe, but also, Sean, you need to get momentum going as you get into conference play. So,
Yeah, so the first game, as we turn the page to Saturday, is the only Big Ten game this weekend. That's Penn State going to Illinois to face the Fighting Illini. That's at noon on Fox. Penn State, big favorites here, 14.5, but you've kind of previewed, or at least teased this game for a couple weeks now. Do you think Illinois could cause some issues?
I think Illinois could cause a lot of issues. I believe the spread right now is 14.5, maybe goes up to 15 or goes back down to a little less than 2 touchdowns. But Brett Bielema, I don't know. I don't know if I want to call him the old dog that never dies or, just a cat with 9 lives. But whether it's been at Wisconsin or Illinois, has been the key of cooking up upsets. It's kind of funny that Mark D'Antonio is back in the Big Ten nowadays because both of them have beaten plenty of talented teams that were more talented than Wisconsin, Illinois, or Michigan State, for that matter. I'm just thinking of a lot of Ohio State teams that went to Madison, or even when Wisconsin or Illinois went on the road. No different than 2 years ago when Illinois, who didn't even make a bowl game in 2021, went into State College and really derailed. I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back in Penn State's 2021 campaign. For that, they'd only lost 1 game to a top 4 Iowa team, and then they came out the next week and had that clunker against Illinois. But, Brett Bielema, whatever brand of football you want to label it, he doesn't win sexy. He doesn't win in the most stylistic way, especially the way he probably won at Wisconsin anymore. But, he's a winner. He's been in this conference for a long time. He's won multiple Big Ten titles with Wisconsin. And I think Illinois does have the clear coaching advantage in this game. But, does that account for the clear talent advantage that Penn State has? I don't know. This is Drew Aller's first real test. Big Ten road opponent on essentially a big noon kickoff. I know the set's not there, but it is 12 on Fox. Big stage for Mr. Aller. Has looked really sharp so far in his 2 starts. But, Illinois is a different beast. I think Bielema's going to throw different coverages at him. I think this will be a similar test to what J.J. McCarthy had to deal with in Week 12 last year when they played Illinois. The week before they played Ohio State, which was, they're going to throw different coverages, and I think they're going to make Aller beat them. They're not going to let Illinois will not let Penn State dominate on the ground. They will not let Singleton or Allen or any of the other running backs get going. They're going to make Aller beat them. And Aller may have to run. You never quite know. JJ had to beat Illinois a few times last year. So I think this is going to be a really intriguing matchup. I can say Illinois could upset them, but I'm not completely comfortable picking it yet on this cast. So I think Penn State will win, but I think it'll be a lot closer than that 14 and a half line we have, Sean.
I do feel like it's going to be one that you can figure out pretty quickly whether Illinois is up to up to the level of Penn State. And, like you said earlier, Illinois hung around and they actually ended up beating them a couple years ago with a team that's probably not as good as they have now. But we'll go to another game here. It's actually 4 games of an ACC versus Big Ten. None of them are of huge note, so we'll kind of go through them all now. Northwestern's at Duke. Going to be tough for the Wildcats. They're 18.5-point dogs. Duke's top 25 team. Northwestern, the issues we've talked about plenty. Minnesota goes to 20th ranked UNC. UNC favored by a touchdown there. Going to be really tough for Minnesota, but doesn't really affect their Big Ten West hopes. Virginia Tech goes to Rutgers. Good opportunity for Rutgers to get another win. And then Syracuse heads to Purdue. So any of those 4 games, Joe, you want to add a little bit on?
Yeah, I'll touch on each quickly. I think Northwestern going to Duke, the line speaks for itself. I think Northwestern, the scoreline was impressive last week. They really struggled to get a decisive lead until the second half of that game. And frankly, for Northwestern, my main concern for them was going 0-12 or, going a really bad 1-11. Obviously, all 1-11s are really bad, but I think Duke right now is kind of in the not quite the Colorado category, but one of the hotter unknown teams in the country. I know they beat Clemson, but Mike Elko's names could be thrown around a lot, not only on this cast, but a lot of national casts for coaching searches, coaching jobs. And I don't think Duke slows down. I think they handle Northwestern. I really like Duke's quarterback. I don't think Northwestern's defense is equipped to deal with him if he gets comfortable in the pocket. So I guess going on to UNC and Minnesota, kind of a similar theme. Not really Minnesota being bad, but another great quarterback, Drake May, prolific, probably a top 5 draft pick this year. And Mac Brown's had plenty of experience, not only in this sport, but home games against lesser foes. So I can't really pick the Gophers to make any real headway in this game. I think it's just going to be about seeing what kind of team they have, more of a litmus test without any real consequence. Virginia Tech and Rutgers, on paper, this might seem like a better game than it is. I think Virginia Tech really struggled against Purdue, hence why Purdue won last week. And Rutgers, I think the biggest thing is Gavin Wimsatt's got to find where he was week 1 in the first half. He didn't look all that comfortable against Temple. I think Rutgers' defense is really good. I think this is a week Shiraka and Wimsatt got to get back on the same page and beat a Power 5 team. But other than those games, Syracuse, Purdue, admittedly, that's going to be another one of these Purdue games. I think Purdue will have 3 close cardiac kind of games in their first 3 games. So definitely good experience because they are still 0-0 in the conference. But Sean, other than that, I don't think there's anything too deep into these games we have to look into story-wise or in the conference as a whole.
Yeah, it's not really the best of the Big Ten going up against 2 of the better teams in the ACC. At least it looks like this year, and then kind of some bottom feeders going up against each other. But probably the biggest game that includes a Big Ten team this week is number 8 Washington going to East Lansing to face the new look Spartans. For a team that has college football playoff aspirations, and with Michigan State's situation, this has got to be a really, really tough spot for the Spartans. They're 16-point home dogs. This game will be on 5 o'clock on Peacock on Saturday. With everything that's going on, any chance the Spartans could at least compete in this one?
I think they could definitely compete. I think the first half they'll be riding a lot of adrenaline. I think the crowd will be very fired up. I know people at work made the joke today in Detroit that their MSU tickets are going for cheaper, but I think if anything, having D'Antonio back on the sidelines and for the 10-year anniversary of their 2013 Rose Bowl team, I think the crowd will be rather fired up. A 5 o'clock kickoff time too. I think a lot of them. This is their biggest home game of the year, except when they play Michigan. So I think this will be a fired up crowd. I think MSU could come out firing, and that's what they're going to have to do. This is a game MSU has to, frankly, take a 2-score lead in early. Analytically, if you look at it, if you get a 2-score lead in the first quarter, you will be in the game in the third quarter no matter what or who you're playing. So I think that's the biggest key for MSU to win this game. But If they don't do that, I don't see a clear path to victory for MSU. Washington and Michael Penix. Penix wants to have some kind of Heisman campaign. He's got to start it this Saturday. And last year, he dominated Michigan State's secondary. There's no other way to put it. He made them look silly. He had guys running the wrong way. He had a tough stand back there and fire. So MSU's front seven is going to have to get a lot of pressure on Penix. They're going to have to vary looks to maybe confuse him a bit. And they can't even let the run game get going. If Washington establishes some sort of run game, this game could get really ugly and out of hand. And if this game goes to a firefight, MSU could not win 45-42 kind of game with Washington. So, keys for MSU is get up early, ride the wave of the crowd, ride the inspiration that D'Antonio probably gives pregame, and hopefully for their sake they jump on Washington and never let up. But if I had to give a prediction shot, I'd have to give Washington. I don't know if they cover the 16, but I think they win somewhere in the 10 to 14 range. I'll throw out a score. I think Washington will win maybe a 38-24 kind of game.
So the rest of the games, Joe, are not really of any note. Louisville goes to Indiana as big favorites. Georgia Southern and Wisconsin, Western Michigan, Iowa. Northern Illinois goes to Nebraska. Good opportunity for Matt Rule to get his first win. And then Michigan wraps up their preseason against Bowling Green. And anything to note from any of these games? Really, if any of them were close, I think we'd be pretty shocked.
Yeah, I guess we could start with Nebraska. That's a team we did pick on a little too harshly yesterday, but I think harshly was justified. I think the most diehard of Nebraska fan would tell you that this is a game they not only have to win, they have to look good. And Jeff Sims in particular has to look good by not turning the ball over. Uh, they should at least have one win right now. I don't think they win the Colorado game 8 out of 10 times, but the Minnesota game they win 8 or 9 out of 10 times. Should they even avoid one of those four turnovers they had? So Sims got to take good care of the ball. I know this will be Nebraska's first home game, so I know they could ride the momentum of the crowd, and that's something I say a lot. But it is college football, and Lincoln is one of the better home environments you will see in the conference. So they will have to ride that. As for the other games, I just think it's fascinating. Georgia Southern does go to Wisconsin. Do I think Georgia Southern has any chance at an upset? No. But Clay Helton and Georgia Southern were the ones who ended the Scott Frost era in Lincoln. So, Wisconsin can't be too comfortable. It wouldn't be shocking if they saw tape of that game from 2022 and Georgia Southern going into Lincoln. As for the big two, Michigan, Ohio State, I think we touched on it yesterday, but Ohio State's got to establish the run game. They got to get their offensive line more comfortable. Kyle McCord looked really good against Youngstown State. So continuing to give McCord momentum going into their I think I would call it a gladiator kind of showdown against Notre Dame next week, which would be the main theme of our preview for week 4. But continue to give McCord confidence, and the offensive line's got to get something going. They got to open up the run game. They got to show that they can establish the run and ride Kyle McCord, because if they get both going, that's when the Ohio State of old, 2019, 2020 Ohio State offenses really come to light. And those two offenses didn't do so bad. They should have beaten Clemson in the 2019 playoff, and it rode Ohio State all the way to the 2020 national title game. And absolutely, I'd say dominant win over Clemson in that Sugar Bowl, Sean. So
I think Ohio State's got to get just put up 40. It might seem a little bit under the radar, but 23-35, you like to see them kind of put it on a team, and I don't think offense will be an issue for them scoring points, but these are the games where you can really, really make it an easy afternoon if you can score in your first 3 drives, and you put up a 40 or 50, and it makes it look a lot better. But if you can't score 40 against the teams that you're playing now, they're not going to get to 40 all year, because the Big Ten defense is a lot better than that. But Joe, I think that's all
Sean,
of the
I
games.
guess
Or
we
yeah,
could
go ahead.
finish. Oh, sorry, we could finish the on Iowa and Michigan. I totally forgot the McNamara and McCarthy. Can't forget about those two. Iowa, on a similar note to what you were saying about Ohio State, Sean. Brian Ferentz has got to score more points. Not only for the sake of his team, for the sake of himself. And Western Michigan is probably the worst defense they will play all year, at least on paper. So Iowa, this is a week kind of like Ohio State, where you're favored by 28 and a half. You got to kind of put it on offense and build some confidence. And Iowa, just like Ohio State, has another, I'm going to call it a gladiator showdown, but a classic Big Ten game. Iowa, Penn State, the whiteout, that'll occur next week, and that'll be another game we preview for a while. So, for Iowa, messages piling on. We know your defense is great. Cade's got to get in rhythm, and I think he will this game. I think this is a game he gets back into rhythm. He finds more connections with those Iowa teammates, and maybe he finds a go-to guy, whether it's his old reliable Eric Gall, whether it's Luke Lachey or not Laporta, but Regatti. This is the week he's going to find it. And lastly, we'll touch on Michigan, the defending champs, for 10 seconds. I'm going to count down as I say it. They have to establish the run game the way they did last year. Nothing more, nothing less. It's Bowling Green, and that's all I have for that.
All right, so that's our game-by-game preview. Joe has a couple of questions, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I think this first one is for me. For context, yesterday I mentioned a lot of head coaching candidates, but this one is, again, from Casey, who's a Spartan. Joe, what do you think about Jim Leonhard? So for everyone who's not aware, Jim Leonhard's the former Wisconsin DC until really since 2022, and he's now at Illinois as analyst, I believe. What do you think about Jim Leonhard as the next Michigan State head coach? I personally think it would be a good hire. I think he knows the conference very well. He had a lot of success at Wisconsin. I think the fact Bill Parker was in his own division shadowed the fact that he was one of the hottest names as a D coordinator, even a head coach. And for example, a lot of NFL defensive coordinator jobs opened up, and Leonhard was interviewed for them, or at least was floated in those circles. So I think he'd be a really good hire. I don't know if that would be the home run hire certain Spartan fans envision, but he knows the conference well. He runs great defense, and Michigan State's football's identity is built on defense and tough guy kind of football that Mark D'Antonio in the glory years for Michigan State instilled. Do I see them hiring Jim Leonhard? I do not. But if they offered him, I think he would take it. I think he would want to be back in the Big Ten. And I think a program like Michigan State with their new facilities would really intrigue Jim Leonhard. So I think it's a great suggestion. But like this whole coaching search, we're probably going to have to wait and see.
They're going to get first looks here of all of them. Like, I'm sure they've already called, but nobody else really has a coaching vacancy right now. And you see it in other sports, and it definitely matters, who's first to call. Which is why you see a lot of coaches fired after the regular season and before the bowl games, so you can start looking for the replacement.
Yeah, Sean, the second one I think is specifically for you. It's a basketball question. From Andrew, I assume he's got to be some kind of Purdue or Indiana fan based on his Instagram bio. Is there any real shot that any player not named Zach Edey wins Big Ten Player of the Year? I'll give that right to you.
Barring an injury, no. He was a National Player of the Year last year, and like, how much worse could he play? Like, he gets the ball, his shots are from so close, and he's got an all right free throw percentage, so he's going to get rebounds. I don't know, if he plays all the games, there's no way he's not not only the Big Ten Player of the Year, but the National Player of the Year. Because if you think about who are the other candidates, you got Trace, he's on the Warriors. Hunter Dickinson, he's on Kansas. You got, there's nobody, unless somebody plays way above their ability and their team is better than Purdue, it should be Edey. He's the best player on the best team, and that's probably who the award should go to.
Yeah, I guess I'll finish Sean's thought. It's maybe I could think of one kind of player that has the star caliber. It could be Tyson Walker when Tyson Walker plays the way he does in March, but Tyson Walker hasn't strung it together. He's a phenomenal player, but in context of Player of the Year in the Big Ten, I don't think Tyson could compete with Zach Edey. So that's just one potential name. I don't know if Sean wanted to float one more, but if not, we can get to our next basketball question.
Yeah, but if you think about just on this, Joe, if you think about taking Edie off Purdue, like they're not even a definite tournament team, and people are talking about them as national championship contenders. So that's where I think that really comes into play. If you take Tyson Walker off Michigan State, they're still probably going to make the tournament. Still probably going to be in the top four in the Big Ten, and he's gotten more consistent over the years, Tyson Walker, but he still doesn't really have to. There's other ways Michigan State can win. There's not really another way for Purdue to win against a high quality opponent. I know Edie missed a game last year against, I think it was Incarnate Word, and they ended up winning by 30 anyway, but they're banking on him being there, and I think everyone else should too.
Absolutely. Sean, this is another hot seat kind of question. I guess people loved those yesterday, and they love with the whole theme of the week with Mel Tucker going. So this one from Jack. I think he is a Wisconsin fan since there's an input in this question that's not natural. Between Chris Holtman, Greg Gard, and Juwan Howard, whose job is the least safe? Is least safe?
Well, Guards is the most safe, so it's between Juwan and Holtman. I'd say Juwan, probably, just because of the incident that happened with Greg Gard and transfers out and losing when you should have made the tournament and we're supposed to be at the top of the Big Ten. I would say Juwan's probably the most hot of those three. Holtman pretty close behind, though. I mean, they're both one season away from being fired. Greg Gard is not, I don't think. I know they missed the tournament last year, but they had a ton of injuries and they still battled a lot of the time. So I don't think Gard is one season away from being fired unless something were to happen off the court or something like that. But no, I would say Juwan, then Holtman, then Gard. But 1 and 2 are much closer than 3.
Absolutely. And this was a very fun question. This is from Noah, and Noah is one of my friends. So thanks again, Noah, for listening. Can you name one future head coach in the Big Ten? So he applies from another conference, I guess an up and comer too. Sean, I'm going to jump right at this one because I've said this for a long time, and maybe this is a unfair answer because he's been in the Big Ten in the past, but I'm going to throw in a Richard Pitino to make a return to the conference. Not maybe in the next 1 or 2 years, but maybe in the coming 4 or 5 years. I think he has New Mexico rolling. I know they didn't succeed in making the tournament, but he's turned that program around in 2 years. That's a program that's has a very passionate fan base. They have such a great home court advantage, and they even beat Rick's Iona College Gales. So I think he's in a perfect place right now. Richard's still a very young guy. He was one of the youngest coaches ever hired for a major job like Minnesota. He was only 31 or 32 when he was hired in 2013, I believe. So still only 41, 42, early 40s, still a very young man in this business. I think he's got a lot to learn. I think he has learned a lot. In my controversial opinion, I don't think he did that bad at Minnesota. I think that's a program that's very hard to win at. And I think New Mexico is kind of the great place for him to relearn things with less of a microscope. And perhaps he returns to an even bigger job in the Big Ten. I'm not saying he'll be the next Indiana coach, but, it's something I think we should keep an eye on. And maybe if we archive this in 2028, it becomes true and I look like a genius.
Yeah, I'll go with Dusty May from Florida Atlantic. I think that he, former Indiana student manager and assistant at a whole load of places before he got the head job at Florida Atlantic. Obviously, everyone remembers Final Four team last year. He's got almost all of his players coming back this year, and now they're in the American Conference. So, at-large bid, fully a possibility for the Owls down there in Boca Raton. But he's going to have his pick. Whatever the best job is in the offseason, it's his if he wants it. Whether that's Minnesota, maybe, or Nebraska, or in another conference, he's going to be the first person that anybody calls for the job. I'm a little bit surprised that he didn't leave this year. Obviously, he has most of his players coming back, but Final Four from the conference that they were in, which I believe was Conference USA, but still, Dusty May is going to get a big job eventually. It might not be in the Big Ten though; it could be a ACC or something. But he's definitely got it if he wants a bigger job.
All right, Sean, our last question. And this one, before I even read it again, I think me and Sean will reserve our right to change this answer. Without naming the teams, we're not going to name what teams we think. How many Big Ten teams make it into the NCAA tournament in 2024? Oh, that's a very easy question. That's sarcastic, of course.
Let's see how many made it last year. I believe it was 8. Quick on the fly research here. By the
Yeah,
All right, so we got Maryland. That's 1. We've got Purdue. That's 2. Michigan State. That's 3. Northwestern. That's 4. Illinois. That's 5. Penn State. That's 6. Indiana. That's 7. Iowa. That's 8. I mean, it's either going to be 7 or 8 or 9. One of those three. It can't be more than 9, and it probably won't be less than 7. I'm trying to think. Over the years, has there ever been a? As you answer the question, I'll do some more research here.
well, I know the least amount of teams in recent time. I think it was 4 in 2018. That was the year Michigan was, funnily enough, the 5 seed in the Big Ten tournament. Nebraska was the 4, and Nebraska got left out of the tournament. But I am gonna have to go with the cop out 6 to 8. I know that's such a lame answer to such a very fun question given to again by Noah. Thanks again, Noah. I'm sure Noah will be asking next how many Big Ten teams will make the playoff, and I'll answer that next
2.
week if he dares to send another issue too. Well, I'll say 4 just for rating's sake, but no, in all seriousness, I think that's a very hard question. But I don't see any of the extremes happening. I don't see 4 and I don't see 10, so I think we'll settle for the middle ground, which is 6 to 8 teams.
Yeah, it might be better for the conference if less teams make it, because last year, I mean, there were 2 teams that were protected seeds, and there were so many in that 8, 7, 8, 9, 10 range, and that means you're probably losing either the first or the second game, and there might be some better teams in the conference if less of them are kind of right around where they were, because Indiana was playing on the final day of the season last year against Michigan, and if they had won, there's a way they could have been the 8 seed or the 2 seed just based on how one game went. So it was so close. The 2 seed was 12-8 Northwestern, and I believe the 10 seed was 9-11 or 8-12. So it was crazy jumbled in the middle, which means there were no good teams rather than a lot of good teams. So it might be better. There might be 3 national championship contenders if there's only 6 Big Ten teams in the tournament. It could happen.
Yeah, Sean, and one quick analogy I'll use for our football fans before we wrap up is the idea in the college football playoff why the Pac-12 hasn't been in since 2016. The Pac-12 this year, for example, is a lot of really good teams. Last year, I think it did too. I think Washington, Oregon, Oregon State, USC, and Utah were all good teams. None of them made the playoff because they all ate each other alive. And I think Sean's referring to that in the Big Ten last year. All the teams, with the exception of Purdue, ate each other alive, didn't really help with seeding. And that's probably part of the reason why we only had one Big Ten team in the Sweet 16 last year, and it was Michigan State. And Michigan State, to be quite frank with you, they were the 7 seed. That was probably the second most popular pick besides having Purdue in the Sweet 16. I know Indiana was a higher seed, but everyone's going to bet on Tom Izzo in March. So something to think about, something us as fans can't control, but something we could definitely consider in the offseason of basketball.
Yeah, so if that's all the questions that you have, Joe, I think we'll wrap up this edition of the In a Nutshell podcast, our Week 3 preview. Be sure to send your questions in, and we'll get to them in the last 5 minutes or so of every show, and we'll see you on Monday for the Week 3 recap. Thanks for tuning in.